There's a significant difference, a difference of dimension between the inner planets and the outer planets. The inner planets have been known for a very long time indeed. These are the ones, Sun, Moon, out to Saturn. But the outer planets have been discovered very recently, since the Renaissance period, when telescopes were invented. We began being able to see a bit further, and we first saw Uranus and then Neptune and then Pluto. Eventually we discovered Chiron. And if we just consider those four outer planets, they're outermost, they're further out than Saturn, as being representative of the expanded level of consciousness that now we can attain to, then we have a better understanding of what they might mean in our horoscope and how to apply Sabian symbols to that meaning. Now, Chiron is the first we meet coming outside of Saturn, and it bridges between Saturn and Uranus. It kind of sometimes comes within Saturn and sometimes goes outside of Uranus. So there's this sense of linkage between the inner and the outer. And it represents the bridge of consciousness necessary to move from the sense of self as being, shall we say, the whole thing, and moving outside of that limited perspective of life to see that there's a much bigger world that we can conceive of if we change our perception. So Chiron is mainly understood if we realize we have to change our way of thinking. It's all to do with perceptual shifts. And Chiron enables us to look at what has happened to us in the past that has remained in our system as hurt, something that we haven't processed yet, we haven't assimilated, and so it sticks in our craw. And all we have to do is to change our way of seeing the events that gave rise to that hurt, and then we can enjoy healing. And when we have that sorted out, that new perception, then we can teach and we can heal others with the same kind of problem. So Chiron's reputation as a healer and a teacher comes from its ability to change how the mind works and what the mind perceives. Uranus is really the operation of mind. If we begin at the very beginning and we think about the creator creating creation, what actually was the very first outpouring of that movement to create something was vibration. In the beginning was the word, sound, vibration. And this is the operation of Uranus. Uranus is vibration, or more particularly electrical energy. That's what we don't really understand what electricity is any more than we understand what the workings of the mind can do at the highest level. But we do know that the mind's operation within the brain is to form electrical impulses. And when we have a sudden inspired thought, we call it a flash of inspiration, and it's likened to lightning. And the operation of Uranus is just like that. It's as though we have a bolt of lightning through us, an electrical charge of such intensity that we simply cannot assimilate it. And we're in danger if we try. The dangers, the twofold dangers, are madness and genius. Genius is an extraordinarily uncomfortable situation to have to put up with. It's given a good reputation, we're applauding geniuses and so on and so forth, but it's a very uncomfortable state of existence to have. Nobody's going to understand you, you can't get your point across, you can't explain what you know. It's awful. And madness is exactly the same kind of thing. You have this certainty of knowledge that you can't get anybody else to understand. I would think quite a lot of mad men and women are actually geniuses in disguise, and quite a lot of geniuses are probably given rather more credit than they're due because they're actually a little bit off kilter in their mind. So the kind of madness genius thing is how we know that Uranus is operating at the highest level. We can't assimilate it. We just can't. It's not one of those energies that you can actually have available for use in your being. You can get echoes of it, and the echoes register as wild thinking, wild behavior, the absolute necessity of freedom and inability and unwillingness to conform to conventionality. Because basically the conventional wisdom is wrong from the position of Uranus, who understands it all. Uranus is mind, pure, unadulterated, divine intelligence. How is Uranus ever going to see the behavior of the human species as being remotely indicative of the way to be, the way to understand, the way to do things? It's not going to do that. Uranus is certain to see everything we do as really stupid, wrong, and leading to the wrong result too. So, therefore, if anybody actually behaves like Uranus, they're going to be seen as the echo of that, as people that are not able to conform to social convention and understand things the way other people understand them. So Uranus is rather similar to the principle in Hinduism of Brahma, creating the world out of mind, pure mind. Pluto I'll go to next, because it's easier to explain Neptune if you understand what Pluto is. Pluto is a chemical reaction. The combining, the integration and disintegration of elements, constantly changing form. See Pluto as a cauldron, and a fire under that cauldron stoking up all the ingredients, the materials, and bubbling away, and actually simply cooking things and changing them all the time. Pluto's job is simply to bring about change. If it were not for constant, bubbling, root level, absolute, fundamental, elemental change, then life would not be. The whole of life's processes are based on this idea. When a caterpillar changes into a butterfly, it goes through the chrysalis phase. And in that phase, pretty much everything is mashed up. There's no order. And that's Pluto operating. So Pluto is the disordering of everything in order to facilitate a chemical process through which its form changes radically, absolutely. And yet the materials that make up the output are just recombined into a different way of being and permanently changed. But you can't destroy matter. You can change matter into energy, you can change energy into matter, but you can't destroy the substance of life. It will not be destroyed. It's beyond all of that. So Pluto is simply reshaping all of the bits and pieces that make up reality. And its job is to make sure everything changes. Nothing maintains its position indefinitely. And in fact, it just bubbles on all of the time. Sometimes it's really obvious that it's happening in a dramatic way, and there's a big shift that occurs, and we call those Pluto transits. But it's actually happening all the time. Now, the universe is like a big bubble, therefore, of a chemical reaction. That's Pluto's contribution to reality. Is just making everything we can conceive, everything that has form, everything that is in our imagination, everything is simply a chemical reaction having no final output. Now, we can move our attention, the mind that Uranus has given us, into this chemical reaction of Pluto, however we choose to do. We can see this or that or the other according to how we focus our attention. So in a strange way, Neptune is that. It's how we focus our attention. And we focus it such that we see what we choose to see. We see everything, and we see it in a glamorized way. We see this bubbling, disgusting mass of Pluto. It is just like turning, well, it's like a cesspit, Pluto. And we see that as though it were beautiful because of Neptune. And we project our image of what we want to see onto this bubbling cesspit of life. And we interpret that through Neptunian eyes, the glamour of Neptune. Neptune is the illusion that we project onto the grim reality that we're actually nothing more than a component in a cesspit of chemical change. And Neptune turns our experience of that destruction and recreation into something which is poetic and beautiful and imaginative and everything that we choose it to be. Neptune is the illusion that we place onto the grim reality of life to make it bearable. And of course it's false. It's not real. It's different for you and me. It's Heisenberg's uncertainty principle operating in real time, because when Neptune operates, it changes what we see as Pluto's chemical reaction. So the observer observing the observed. That's what Neptune is. And if you assimilate that, you understand life. In other words, the way in which we perceive the constant dynamism of change that Pluto represents depends upon how we construct the illusion we have of the nature of reality. Some people who are interested in violence and so on, they're going to inhabit that part of Pluto's cauldron which is violent. And those who want to consider that we're under the auspices of lizards and aliens, they would inhabit that part of Pluto's processes of change. And those of us who are romantic and would love to sort of find that romance in life is always leading to happiness, we would live the peaceful husband, wife and 2.4 kids kind of life in a suburban house in a lovely area which is not too noisy, and so on. We choose the parts that we want to choose of the reality of life, and we can do that on every level. So we can think about life as being harsh and negative and dangerous, and we can think about life as being fun and exciting and adventurous, and we can think about life as being an opportunity to explore peacefulness and harmony and beauty. And whatever we do with the mind, the Uranus mind, mastering that Uranus ability to think clearly and creatively, whatever we do with the mind becomes the illusion of Neptune. Neptune is the workings of mind projected onto the reality of Pluto, which is that everything is constantly dying and being reborn, and nothing has duration at all. That's the formula. Now, this operates through our persons as transits and natal placements of these 3 or 4 outer planets. If we go through a transit of Chiron, however it may interact with our natal planets, if it's a Chiron transit, we're going to have to change the way we perceive. In other words, we might be encouraged to see a glass as half full instead of half empty. It doesn't change the glass and the contents, but it changes what happens inside our head. And if we go through a Uranus transit, we're being offered a higher level of energy. Uranus is vibration, the vibration of mind in particular. And when it operates through us, we're being dosed up with lightning. Our voltage is being increased. and we can think more quickly, think more clearly, think about things that we haven't thought of before, and we're highly energized by this, and we get things done. They might not work in the long term. They might come apart as soon as we've finished the job of trying to do them. They might just fall apart. There's no guarantee with Uranus that anything will last. And sometimes every 40 years or so, every 42 years really, Uranus goes out of bounds. Some planets go out of bounds, which means that their declination, their distance from the horizon, is in excess of 23 degrees, 28 minutes. Now, when Uranus goes out of bounds, it just goes into the areas of consciousness that we just don't visit very often. And it did this around the 50s, and it did this again around, 40 years later, around the late 80s. And it's going to do it again in about 10 years. And when that happens, we're going to have thoughts which we haven't had before. We're going to have realizations that we've not assimilated before in human consciousness, new ideas, brand new ideas. So around 2030, we're going to start looking for evidence that Uranus is at its peak, at its most vibrant. And those of us who are open to it, really wanting our minds to dance and to a new tune, then we'll be understanding the whole of life in a different way. We'll get the mystery of life like we've never got it before. I remember this time in the late 80s, there was a bunch of us who were just like that. We were, at that time, hippies, I suppose, and we were doing crazy things, and some were doing drugs, and some were doing inventions, and some were doing crazy behaviors, and we were all behaving in a very Uranian way. And we understood a lot more than had ever been understood before, collectively. And I think this is a bit of a secret with Uranus. If you can actually get together within a group of people to assimilate Uranus energy, you're going to have a much better job of doing it. There was a time when I was doing meditations in the chapel of an abbey in Devon, in England. And we used to go on a Friday night to do a collective meditation. And some of these meditations were almost painful. The mind was being given so much new information, new understandings, new consciousness, that it was a painful experience. And I couldn't stop. I mean, I was in the middle of a meditation and my head was hurting and I couldn't stop. Just like you were told that you would be in the case where you were being electrocuted. You can't pull your hand away from the electrocution. And it felt just like that. So I think this is the danger of Uranus, that you can't assimilate it personally, and it's much better to be assimilated as a group. And it ties up with the idea of Aquarius being a group energy. If you have a Uranus transit, therefore, it's very healthy for you to talk about your feelings and your thoughts with other people, just to see if you can assimilate it in a group experience. Now, a Neptune transit is always going to be confusing for you. You just won't understand what's going on, because what's happening is your illusion of life, the glamour that you've placed on the reality, Pluto's grubby reality, your illusion is being washed away and actually replaced by another one. You're wanting a different field of vision, field of imagination, and that's good, because you can imagine more and more deeply and more subtly the nature of reality. But it begins by the washing away of your old one. So typically we're investing our life into something which is false, because Neptune requires us to do that. And then during a Neptune transit, it comes along and washes away the reality that we have conceived of as being real, We don't know it's false. We just see reality being washed away. Everything that we thought was real is just not there anymore. Love disappears. Financial security disappears. Our investment in life just dissolves. And we're left with nothing but confusion. The great thing about Neptune is that it goes along with anesthetics. You know, we tend to get anesthetized during a Neptune transit. You know, we're losing it all, and we feel, oh well, never mind. To some extent, it's a grievous situation too. But a Neptune transit is filled with loss and confusion until the new sort of version comes along. The end of a Neptune transit is the very opposite. It's delightful, dream world stuff. A Pluto transit is just like becoming aware that you're part of this cauldron. You know, you feel to be like you're in a cooking pot, and it's very uncomfortable indeed. And you lose bits of your being and your beliefs and your thoughts and your power. You're just an ingredient in a pot of cooking. And it's awful. And you lose power. You have no power at all until you come out the other side, when you actually have the greater power, that now you understand quite how life is. It is not easy and good. It is difficult and bad equally often. And when you come to terms with that, and you get on top of the fact that you're in control of how much of the grubbiness of life you engage with, and you can just turn away from the worst of it, when you understand that, which you will do with Pluto, which you will not do with Neptune. Neptune will give you the illusion and the glamour, but it won't explain to you that it is an illusion. But when you go through a Pluto transit, you come to understand that everything that you've invested your life in is actually false. And you can choose what to invest it in future, knowing that that's equally false. That's what Pluto tells you. You're going to die. You know, everyone's going to die. And that's the truth of it. And living with that truth is tremendously empowering. It just blows away the illusion that you have any self-importance at all, or any stability into the future. Pluto transits are very empowering indeed, if you can survive them, which not everybody does.